mated with that mighty hour, as if the last remnant had been slain by death of the humanity that once was hers. A moment yet, she lingered motionless and looked down on the dead man at her feet.
Good morning. We're reading in Book 9, the Book of Eternal Night, Canto 1, Towards the Black Void. We've come to page 573, towards the bottom, 7 lines up from the bottom. In the last canto, Death in the Forest, we witnessed Satyavan's death and dying in the arms of Savitri. And then Savitri senses the living presence of the god of death at the end of the canto, coming to take Satyavan's soul away. So in this canto 1, Towards the Black Void, they begin their journey into death, into death's realm. And we see that Savitri also undergoes a change at the beginning of the canto. It says towards the middle of page 571, "Then suddenly there came on her the change, which in tremendous moments of our lives can overtake sometimes the human soul and hold it up towards its luminous source. The veil is torn, the thinker is no more. Only the spirit sees, and all is known. Then a calm power seated above our brows is seen, unshaken by our thoughts and deeds. Its stillness bears the voices of the world. Immobile, it moves nature, looks on life. It shapes immutably its far-seen ends, untouched and tranquil amid error and tears, and measureless above our striving wills. Its gaze controls the turbulent whirl of things." So she's experienced that change. And then we were reading, just at the top, we see on page 573, a force descended, trailing endless lights, linking time seconds to infinity. Illimitably, it girt the earth and her. It sank into her soul, and she was changed. And it enters the mystic lotus in her head, this force descending through the crown chakra. And then, as if a last remnant had been slain, as if the last remnant had been slain by death of the humanity that once was hers. So we see that she is really getting changed the Divine Mother is assuming control of her life and body. Now all her acts sprang from a Godhead's calm. So that's where we left off. And perhaps Shohini can begin. We get the microphone. So, yes.
Calmly she laid upon the forest soil the dead who still reposed upon her breast, and bore to turn away from the dead form. So now she rose to meet the dreadful god. That mightier spirit turned its mastering gaze on life and things, inheritor of a work left to it unfinished from her halting past. When yet the mind, a passionate learner, toiled, and ill-shaped instruments were crudely moved. Transcendent now was the poor human rule. A sovereign power was there, a godlike will. A moment yet she lingered motionless, and looked down on the dead man at her feet. Then, like a tree recovering from a wind, she raised her noble head, fronting her gaze. Something stood there, unearthly, sombre, grand, a limitless denial of all being, that wore the terror of and wonder of a shape. In its appalling eyes, the tenebrous form bore the deep pity of destroying gods. A sorrowful irony curved the dreadful lips that speak the word of doom. Eternal night, in the dire beauty of an immortal face, pitying a rose, receiving all that lives, forever into its fathomless heart, refuge of creatures from their anguish and world pain.
Thank you. So Savitri calmly lays Satyavan's dead body on the forest floor, and she rises to confront the god of death. And then there's an interesting sentence. That mightier spirit turned its mastering gaze on life and things, inheritor of a work left to it unfinished from her halting past. When yet the mind, a passionate learner, toiled, and ill-shaped instruments were crudely moved. So it suggests that that spirit within her is taking up the work of previous lives, perhaps lives of vibhuti, lives in which the outer instruments were still dominant over the spirit within. The ill-shaped instruments were crudely moved. So she's taking up an unfinished work of confronting and overcoming death. She may have participated in the evolution of beings and of humanity, but still at a stage in which they were subject to death. But now she's going to confront death. That's the unfinished work. And we see that now, again, that greater spirit of the Divine Mother is there, taking full control over her actions. A sovereign power was there, a godlike will. Yeah, normally the instruments of mind, life, and body, which rule our nature, are very much flawed instruments, and they're crudely moved. So our life moves in crude movements. But now she's transcended that. This greater spirit within her has taken control over this instrument. So she recovers from this shock of Satyavan's death, stands up, recovers her poise, and confronts death. She raised her noble head, fronting her gaze. Something stood there, unearthly, somber, grand, a limitless denial of all being that wore the terror and wonder of a shape. Yeah, it gives us the sense that subjective reality of what he represents is the dominant thing, and that is wearing this shape, this form. So it has these appalling eyes, which bear the deep pity of destroying gods. It's interesting that it should have this pity, but it is a god, and it perhaps understands and maybe feels something of the pain and suffering and loss that the human beings face when he takes away their soul. But then in the next line, a sorrowful irony curved the dreadful lips. So there's this pity, but also a kind of perhaps ironic, I don't know if it's a smile, but something perhaps like that disdains the littleness and the transience of these poor creatures who must all end and come into his realm and disappear. So again, this word pitying arose, this pitying again comes, receiving all that lives forever into its fathomless heart, refuge of creatures from their anguish and world pain. Perhaps that's another aspect of death that should not overlook, that it also is a relief to us in our pain and suffering at the end of life. We enter into that calm, that silence. So let's continue, Tinika.
Of creatures from their anguish and world pain. His shape has nothingness made real. His limbs were monuments of transience, and beneath brows of unvarying calm, like godlike lids, silent beheld the writhing serpent life. Unmoved, their timeless white, unchanging gaze had seen the unprofitable cycle pass, survived the passing of unnumbered stars, and sheltered still the same immutable orbs. The two opposed each other with their eyes, woman and universal God. Around her, piling their void, unbearable loneliness upon her mighty, uncompanioned soul, many inhuman solitudes came close. Vacant eternities, forbidding hope, laid upon her their huge and lifeless look, and to her ears, silencing earthly sounds, a sad and formidable voice arose, which seemed the whole adverse worlds. Unclasped, it cried, thy passionate influence, and relax, O slave of nature, changing tool of change's laws, who vainly writhed rebellion to my yoke, thy elemental grasp, weep and forget. Entomb thy passion in its living grave. Leave now the once loved spirit's abandoned robe. Pass lonely back to thy vain life on earth.
Thank you. Sri Aurobindo continues his description of death. Again, that inner quality is emphasized. His shape was nothingness made real. and his limbs were monuments of transience. So they're expressing this transience of life. And beneath brows of unwearying calm, large godlike lids, silent, beheld the writhing serpent life. Writhing is kind of wiggling in agony, wiggling in pain usually. So he looks on this suffering life with these calm eyes, this unchanging gaze. Which had seen the unprofitable cycles pass, survive the passing of unnumbered stars, and sheltered still the same immutable orbs. So these orbs are his eyes still. So he's looked on all of this, even the passing of the stars that are born and burn and then decay and fizzle out or explode or whatever they do and disappear. So he's watched that. He's an immortal being. So Savitri is confronting him. And she's also facing this atmosphere that he brings with him, this unbearable loneliness, this emptiness which he brings. Many inhuman solitudes came close. Vacant eternities, forbidding hope, laid upon her their huge and lifeless look. Yeah, it's curious. I don't quite understand, but these many inhuman solitudes came to her. Maybe different kinds of atmospheres or different moods of that loneliness and solitude and emptiness were touching her. Many instances of this death. And then she hears a sad and formidable voice arose, which seemed the whole adverse worlds. Unclasp, it cried, thy passionate influence, and relax, O slave of nature, changing tool of changeless law, who vainly writhest rebellion to my yoke, thy elemental grasp. Weep and forget. Entomb thy passion in its living grave. Leave now the once loved spirit's abandoned robe, pass lonely back to thy vain life on earth. So he's calling on her to release her influence, her hold over Satyavan. Go back to your vain life on earth. Leave him to me. Leave his soul to me. Weep and forget. All beings are transient. They come to me at last. You go back now. So next, read it. Please read it first. Oh.
Full stop and another line. Eternal life. The same line is full stop and starts from another sentence.
Okay, but is this at the top of the page here? Yeah, I don't have the numbers, so you have to read it.
So around 3 lines from 5
Oh.
that speak the word of doom, full stop, eternal life, desire, beauty of another place.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to see that here the sentences.
Yeah. These are called enjambed sentences. So when they stop mid-line and then a new one starts. So I've just been doing this study of sentences in Savitri. So I've counted 25 instances like this in Savitri. And yeah, there's several in this canto alone. There's one right on the next page, at the top of the next page. There's also another one. And
every line has full meaning. When we see this line, and it makes both the meaning is this word and this word, and also every line has a full meaning.
yeah, he tries to, or tries successfully to have each line kind of form a complete kind of idea or something that can be taken on its own. It has a certain fullness and completeness. In these cases, often it gives a certain emphasis to that second sentence coming in the latter part of the line. So, because it's kind of hanging there at the end. So like here, that speak the word of doom, close, and then eternal night. So it kind of just highlights that second part, which also kind of also is in a way completing or carrying forward the meaning of the earlier sentence.
Is it also because we can divide this chapter, this part, we can divide much. It acts as the original one, and later sections he divides many times. But this part of the movie we can divide much or hardly anything.
Well, there are more, like especially in the previous canto, in which, Book 8, the Book of Death, consisting of just that one canto which was left unfinished. So that has perhaps the most of these in-jam sentences. So perhaps like the earlier versions had more of them. But it's not only that. Also some of the later versions also have them. So Yeah, you'll find them in other cantos as well, like even in the last canto of the book, this book 11, there's just one canto, there's some in there. So it wasn't just something left over from early on that it, so I think he uses it, rarely as a kind of technique, perhaps to emphasize something. Like the other occurrence here at the top of page 575. First it's describing his voice, and then it begins, unclasp, it cried. So then after describing death's voice, then he gives the first word, which he utters in that same line. The meter? Well, I didn't parse it, but probably it will follow kind of the meter. Mm.
But as you said, all many passages have this, and we have to read the whole, not just the line, but the whole continues. It starts running, many passages.
Mm.
Not that one sentence, but the whole paragraph and the whole.
Mm.
But in general, when we read, the rhythmic vibration has that effect of the mantra.
Yeah, the lines have this mantric quality, but yeah, the sentences can vary. There can be many line sentences or very short one-line sentences. So each then has to form a harmony with that complete sentence. All the different lines also have to kind of fit together in a meaningful way, and then also fit with the sentences that come before and after and so forth. But each one in itself also has this kind of beautiful quality that one can look at it and almost take as a mantra, many of the lines that are there. Mm. Mm. So I think we're kind of finished with this. So he's telling Savitri now, go back to earth and your vain life, and leave his soul to me. So he continues. Yeah, it ceased. Yeah, it's a beautiful line.
It ceased, she moved not, and it spoke again, lowering its mighty key to human chords. Yet a dread cry behind the uttered sounds, echoing all sadness and immortal scorn, moaned like a hunger of far wandering waves. Wilt thou forever keep thy passionate hold, thyself a creature doomed like him to pass, denying his soul death's calm and silent rest? Relax thy grasp. This body is earth's and thine. His spirit now belongs to a greater power. Woman, thy husband suffers. Savitri drew back her heart's force that clasped his body still.
where from her lap pronounced on the smooth grass, softly it lay. As often before, in sleep, when from their couch she rose, in the white dawn, called by her daily tasks, now too, as if called, she rose and stood gathered in lonely strength, like one who drops his mantle for a race and waits the signal, motionlessly swift. She knew not to what course, her spirit above, on the crypt summit of her secret form, like one left sentinel on a mountain crest, a fury-footed splendor, puissant winged, watched, flaming silent, with her voiceless soul, like a still sail upon a windless sea. White, passionless it rode, an anchored might, waiting what far-reached impulse should arise out of the eternal depths and cast its surge.
Thank you. Let's pause. So here, Death again continues speaking. And again, Sri Aurobindo describes his voice, lowering its mighty key to human chords, yet a dread cry behind the uttered sounds, echoing all sadness and immortal scorn, moaned like a hunger of far wandering waves. And then he asks, wilt thou forever keep thy passionate hold, thyself a creature doomed like him to pass, denying his soul death's calm and silent rest?
What we read before, that comes to me, multitude of human cause, and every atom of sadness and water form is behind. I'm always recognize that the mother came down to overcome that. That was several letters to let's say, and from my understanding, to dissolve the sadness which goes with that.
Dissolve the what?
To resolve sadness and
Oh.
human hanging and darkness. That is from my understanding the work she did. Because she also often mentioned that that they go to the light. The soul is not, it is the mourning and of the human beings. And I recognize also when Darshan was on his passing day, she also mentioned that they should not mourn. And when I was inside this is joy. She is in the, or she is alive. She is in the light. What is blessing for? So I think this understanding the mission of the work of Kamala regarding the death very triggered here.
Yeah, what Margaret is saying, for those who can't hear and from afar, that part of Mother's work was to not only to overcome death, but to relieve this kind of suffering and sadness that's associated with death in human beings. And so here, death's voice kind of carries some of that, those vibrations of sadness. And so her work involved also that. And then there was also that other work of kind of clearing the pathway for the souls to enter into the light without having to go through kind of the torturing influences of the vital in the soul's passage to the psychic world, to ease that passage.
What he said is correct, that Mother also mentioned it's only the egoistic thinking in the vital way and moving. But in the right way, done in the right way, sending lovable thoughts and that kind of thing becomes, even in the human way, is always helpful because they immediately receive your vibrations for the soul of the person. It is just excessive thinking and excessive projection. But that being said here, is one of the arguments that always the dark force plays here with Savitri. That always everything is transient, that always is born and like this. And there is much higher truth in Shiva universe. And if we put the attitude and vibration with which you approach it, that
Yeah, that's interesting. Because, yeah, they would say this kind of grieving and mourning and, clinging to the departed loved one only kind of makes it more difficult for them to pass to their place of rest after death. And so it's better not to do that, to send this kind of love and light and help to the departed soul rather than this clinging. But here, death is kind of telling her the same, like unclasp your influence, stop holding him back. He's wanting to go to his place of rest. So, but she's got a bigger mission, not just clinging to him out of desire or some kind of surface reason, but she's actually going to confront death himself and his hold over the soul. So we can continue.
Then Death, the king, leaned boundless down, as leans night over tired lands, when evening pales and fading gleams break down the horizon's walls. Nor yet the dusk grows mystic with the moon. The dim and awful Godhead rose erect from his brief stooping to his touch on earth, and, like a dream that wakes out of a dream, forsaking the poor mold of that dead clay, another luminous Satyavan arose, starting upright from the recumbent earth, as if someone over viewless borders stepped, emerging on the edge of unseen worlds. In the earth's day, the silent marvel stood between the mortal woman and the god. Such seemed he as if one departed came, wearing the light of a celestial shape, splendidly alien to the mortal air. The mind sought this long loved and fell back foiled from unfamiliar hues, beheld yet longed by the sweet radiant form unsatisfied, incredulous of its too bright hints of heaven. Too strange the brilliant phantasm to life's clasp, desiring the warm creation of the earth, reared in the ardor of material suns. The senses seized in vain a glorious shade. Only the spirit knew, the spirit still, and the heart divined the old loved heart, though changed.
Thank you. Let's pause. The first sentence, 4 lines, is very beautiful, describing death, maybe leaning down to touch Satyavan, lean boundless down, but then he compares, Sri Aurobindo compares his leaning as leans the night over tired lands, when evening pales and fading gleams break down the horizon's walls. Suggests also that this breaking of the limits that death brings, nor yet the dusk grows mystic with the moon. And then the dim and awful Godhead rose erect from his brief stooping to his touch on earth. And like a dream that wakes out of a dream, so here he's going to describe Satyavan's soul, forsaking the poor mold of that dead clay, another luminous Satyavan arose, starting upright from the recumbent earth, as if someone over viewless borders stepped, emerging on the edge of unseen worlds. So out of Satyavan's dead body laying on the forest floor, this luminous Satyavan, his soul perhaps still encased in the vital and mental sheaths, stand upright. But it carries this unearthly ambience or atmosphere. It's kind of luminous. It's not earthly any longer. It's a spirit. And then in the earth day, the silent marvel stood between the mortal woman and the God. Sri Aurobindo first places him between Savitri and the god of death because they're both vying for his soul.
So that is in one sentence. What? This sentence starts, the dim and awful Godhead rose erect.
Right.
Ne? From his brief stooping to his touch on earth. And then another luminous Satyavana rose. Is this connected?
Yeah, it's perhaps, that's why I was suggesting perhaps he's coming down to the earth, he's taking Satyavan's soul now. So out of the dead body, Satyavan's soul arises. So this is coming in response to this leaning down of death. He's come down to take Satyavan's soul. And now he's going to lead the soul to his realm. He's leaving the dead body for Savitri and the world, but he's going to take that soul with him. And then towards the end, it describes something of Satyavan's experience here. He's perhaps still conscious in his vital and mind. And the mind is looking around for something that it can feel and touch and feel familiar with. But now he's changed. The mind sought things long loved and fell back, foiled. It's unable to catch from unfamiliar hues. Beheld yet longed by the sweet radiant form unsatisfied. So he senses his new or his subtle body, but he doesn't feel his physical body, so he's unsatisfied. He's longing for that touch of earth, of physicality. Incredulous of its too bright hints of heaven, kind of skeptical or not feeling convinced by this subtle body, this luminous body which he's become. Too strange, the brilliant phantasm to life's clasp. Desiring the warm creations of the earth, reared in the ardor of material suns. The senses seized in vain a glorious shade. They can't catch any of, the earthly shades. Only the Spirit knew the Spirit still. It still recognizes itself, Satchivan, and the heart divine, the old loved heart, though changed, he also still feels his emotional being, recognizes it, but it's changing now. He's living in that subtle form.
That's from where, when you die, when you die, first your physical body goes, and slowly your vital being goes, then the mental being goes. Slowly, the ladder from physical to vital,
Right.
mental.
Right.
And then, when it's free from all these attachments, then it goes to its next destination.
Right. In that transition from the physical to the psychic world, we first drop the physical body, then the vital body, then the mental body, and then the psychic being is left to go to its place of rest. And that can take some time, depending on the person, the state of the soul at that moment. Yeah, some even can leave the body and not really understand that they've left, because they're living in that vital form now, and they maybe don't even recognize that they've left the physical body. When it happens suddenly during war. So we can continue.
Between two realms he stood, not wavering, but fixed in quite strong expectancy, like one who, sightless, listens for a command. So were the immobile on the earthly field. Powers not of earth, though one of inhuman clay. On either side of one, two spirits strove. Silence battled with silence, vast with vast. But now the impulse of the path was felt, moving from the silence that supports the stars. Too much to touch the confines of the visible world. Luminous he moved away. Behind him death went slowly with his noiseless tread, as seen in dream-built fields, a shadow herdsman glides behind some wanderer from his voiceless herds. And Savitri moved behind eternal death. Her mortal pace was equalled with the gods. Wordless, she travelled in her lover's steps, planting her human feet where his had trod, into the perilous silences beyond.
Thank you. So we've just had the description of Satyavan, his soul arising out of his dead physical body, standing upright between Savitri and the god of death. And now he's kind of in between the two realms of earth and the beyond. But he has these two powerful forces on either side, and he's kind of waiting, uncertain what to do next, fixed in quiet, strong expectancy, like one who, sightless, listens for a command. So they're standing there immobile, not moving for a moment. Savitri, and then in between Satyavan and death. And the two, Savitri and death, are confronting one another. And then the impulse of the path was felt. So they begin to move. They begin to move towards death's realm. And as they move away into the darkness, Satyavan leads, and behind him death went slowly with his noiseless tread, as if in a dream a herdsman may follow behind a stray wanderer from his herd. And Savitri moved behind eternal death. Her pace was equaled with the gods, and she traveled in her lover's steps, in his footsteps, planting her human feet where his had trod, into the perilous silences beyond.
Now the impulse of the path was felt. There's a definite, in suggesting there's a definite path for the soul to follow. And to start with what? I'm just trying to describe an
Well, yeah, I wouldn't put it quite like that, but I think it's just that they're feeling that it's time to move. You know, like they're just standing there kind of uncertain what to do. But it's not that they're going to stand there forever. They're there, you know, in the passage to death, right? From life to death. And so that passage is calling. Now it's time to move. Now I don't know that it's like a defined path that everyone follows this particular path, but in a sense, maybe in a general way, we move through these realms like you described, into the vital world, into the mental world. So also they are going to kind of proceed through some different realms between the earthly life and the silence. I mean, they're not described here, but they're just referred to as silences now. But we'll see that they go through different kinds of atmospheres, different realms of existence. Mm.
Everybody uses for universal.
Right, right. Yeah. Yeah, first it begins with Satchivan leading, but it's as if death is still guiding him, like a herdsman kind of guides his wanderer from his flock.
But how the impulse of the past was felt, moving from the silence that follows the silence.
Mm.
So it is as you said, it's the divine principle of the silence, supposed to start, and the path towards the divine. That is what I'm also, so it's coming together.
Yeah, but I'm thinking, I mean, in the previous sentence at the end there, silence battled with silence. There's two silences here. So he's moving from one, the silence that supports the stars, to this, into the perilous silences beyond. Right? So he's moving from one silence to another. So I think we stop there for now.
Between two hills he stood, not wavering, but fixed in quiet, strong expectancy, like one who sightless listens for a command. So were they immobile on that earthly field, powers not of earth, though one in human clay. Luminous he moved away, behind him death.
Thank you. Thanks to Sri Aurobindo.